All right, with that call recording, I will mute myself, and it is all yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, as Sarah was saying, I have my hats in a couple different places here at the Spokane office, but I am the aviation program leader there, and so there's a couple different roles that come with that. One is making sure that the forecast staff is trained up on aviation forecasts, including tasks and the discussion pieces, doing verification, but then the third part of it is the outreach and getting out there and speaking to the pilots. And I've really enjoyed this. The outreach program before I started was a bit more passive. We would kind of wait for any pilot groups reaching out to us to wanting to do a presentation. And so last year I wanted to take a more active approach and kind of threw a wide net out there to reach out to different pilot groups and see, and airports as well, getting out to the airports to talk to them, and just try to get out there and meet the pilots and the airport managers and see how we can better serve our area. So this slideshow that I have is going to talk about how I'm sort of revamping the program. It's just kind of beginning with it, and I'm still learning a lot and still have a lot of work to do. But another part of this presentation is just to talk about the Spokane area and some of the different weather hazards that we have as well. So I'll talk a background about the Spokane County Warning Area, or the CWA there. So talk about our topography. As many of the offices here in the West, topography plays a big role, and just kind of talk about how the topography plays a role in our area. And some of the aviation users that I've been learning about, getting out into our area, meeting different pilots, and then the weather hazards, and then how the outreach program is evolving. So just to start, look at the CONUS here of the different weather forecast offices. So Spokane, just to orient ourselves, is up here in the upper left. And as Sarah mentioned, we cover much of eastern Washington and into North Idaho. But before I go into that, we do have a good potential of some severe weather. So I wanted to just put this slide in today. If you are not familiar with the Storm Prediction Center's website, they do obviously put information out for severe weather, and they have different categories from just a general threat of thunderstorms in this light green color, and going all the way out to where they have marginal slight risk, enhanced, and then out to high risk. But this is the first time I think that I've worked here where we've had an enhanced risk. We don't see a lot of severe weather across our forecast area here, but this orange color is the outline for an enhanced risk. So we do have a pretty good chance for severe weather. And this graphic that you see in the upper left, and Sarah was talking about it in her social media presentation, which I thought was great, the different weather stories that the forecast offices issue. And this is one of the current weather stories that we have out on our page. And so if you were to click on our forecast page, you would see this. And it talks about the times we're expecting these thunderstorms between 4 and 9 p.m. today. The big threat is going to be the potential for damaging winds, but we could also see some large hail. And that goes into this other graphic on the right-hand side, which is from the Storm Prediction Center's webpage. And this is the outlook for the wind outlook. And so this red area is a 30% chance, and that blue is our forecast area. So it's covering a lot of our western zones there, and then that black hatched area is a 10% or greater probability of wind gusts of 65 knots or greater. So needless to say, it is not going to be a very good, at least, day. We actually have thunderstorms in our area already to really be flying, but especially as we go into the evening hours. Just wanted to mention that really quick. I have some Google Earth images here for my next few slides, but just to kind of zoom into eastern Washington and North Idaho. And then these red points, these are some of our bigger airports that we have in our area. And I'm going to have some animations in here too, so hopefully they go smoothly. But we have Seattle's area off to our west, Pendleton to our south, and Missoula off to our east. And so I'm not going to have their airports here. Like I said, I'm just kind of focusing here on our Spokane area. But we do get some commercial traffic into our area. Spokane International handles the majority of our commercial traffic. See, 68% of that is commercial air traffic into our county warning area. We don't get a lot of flights. It's not really, I guess, what I consider a high-stress airport for commercial air traffic. On average, 187, and that's encompassing all of the air traffic, not just commercial. But if you compare that with, say, like Seattle off to our west, where they have 1,200 per day, and you can see 97% of that air traffic is commercial there. So they're an obviously large airport on a national scale. And even though Spokane International is our biggest one for commercial traffic, in the grand scheme of things, it's a fairly small drop in the bucket there. But so we do get some, and I just wanted to kind of point that out. Grant County International, so that would be here in our basin, and I'll talk more about the topography and how that's laid out in some slides. But it's actually a fairly large airport here as far as size. It's actually one of the largest airports in the United States, 47 acres wide, and the runway itself, their main runway, is over 13,000 feet. So it was actually once Larson Air Force Base, and it can handle some very large aircraft, 747s, 777s, the KC-135s. And right now, currently, it's utilized as a major training and certification area for these large commercial aircraft. And in fact, Boeing, when they want to test out some of the new planes, they will take off and land at the Grant County International. So, and then some of our other airports that does handle some commercial air traffic, Pangborn Memorial in Wenatchee. We also have Pullman Moscow. That's where WSU is located. They both handle some flights to and from Seattle, a handful of flights from Alaska Horizon, and Lewiston also does have some flights that come in from Salt Lake City. Delta flights will come in there. And then up here in Coeur d'Alene, if anybody is familiar with the region here, Pappy Bullington Field is a destination for some charter flights as well. It's actually a pretty popular destination, a very nice area there, where there's a nice resort, and so there's some charter flights that go in there as well. So just this is another Google image here. Now I put on some of the blue airports, which is indicating where the IWAWS, so Automated Surface Observing Systems, where you actually get weather data that is being reported at those airports. So all of these locations, there are automated weather surface observations there, either ASOS or AWOS. And then so some other aviation interests that we have here. So this purple location is the Fairchild Air Force Base. So that is located actually very close to Spokane International, and located actually close to our office. But they have some refueling tankers is kind of the big thing there that they have in and out. But Grant County International also, they have those airplanes that will come in and out there as well. And then kind of moving around, I talked about Coeur d'Alene, where they have some charter flights in and out of there. Sandpoint also is a destination where we can get some charter flights. So we do have some other interests where those flights are coming into those airfields. Going up into the Methow Valley, which is into the east slopes of the Cascades, I actually went up there and did a talk for the Washington Pilot Association, and I talked to a hot air balloon pilot there, and he talked about how early in the morning they will do flights down the valley. And I'm actually looking into maybe taking a ride on one of those flights here this summer. I thought that would be really cool to do. I almost did this, went skydiving out of Chelan, but that's another kind of spot where planes will come up, and they have some skydiving excursions. Wenatchee, Ephrata, there's get some really good thermals here in the basin, so some soaring flights there as well. And then over into Lewiston is a kind of a popular spot where there are some helicopters on that airfield. And so there are some kind of touring flights there, sightseeing flights in that area. So these are just some kind of other things that I've learned about our area, and different kind of aircraft that will be up, and pilots. So it's been very interesting, and I'm learning quite a bit. I also wanted to share that Walter did a great presentation talking about soaring forecasting, and on our page here we do have some soaring data that I know some of our customers like to look at. And the link is actually right here to get to it. It's a long link, but I know that presentation will be available to everybody, and so you can find it there. But it's actually, there's all these different sites where you can look at the forecast, and it's just taking the buffer data. And when you click on one of these links, you'll get this page that opens up. And I'm a meteorologist. I am not a pilot myself, so a lot of these numbers I'm not super familiar with. But I know that it is a popular product for some of our local soaring pilots here that they like to look at as well. So that's another product that we kind of offer for our customers here. Just a bit more about our topography. So I talked about some of the airports around, but we are surrounded by mountains, and these are all the different mountain ranges. We have the Blue Mountains that will extend through northeast Oregon into southeast Washington. And so the Lewiston Airport is just kind of in the foothills of the Blues. The Bitterroot Range over into Idaho and going into western Montana. And then up towards the north, the Selkirks and Cabinets in North Idaho. And, of course, the Cascades going through central Washington. We do have some automated weather sensors that will guide pilots through the Cascades. There's Stampede Pass. These are along Interstate 90 here that will go through the Cascades, and then Mullen Pass actually, again, going along the route of Interstate 90 there, going through Washington, Idaho to kind of guide pilots over into western Montana. So these are the, what I have plotted here, or just kind of outlined, is sort of our regions inside of Spokane that that our zones are based off of. The Waterville Plateau is a kind of a higher elevation area. And so Pangborn Memorial, or Wenatchee there, will be, is kind of between the Cascades, and so a higher elevation of the plateau. And then the Columbia Basin, a fairly large basin here surrounded by the mountains. So we have Grant County there, and then the elevation kind of gradually increases up towards Spokane. And then the Palouse, where we have Pullman and Moscow, and then the Snake River Valley, where we have Lewiston. So Lewiston is kind of situated into a valley there along the Snake River. And also the Clearwater River, which comes in from the east there and connects with the Snake River. So I just wanted to talk about these a little bit, and how we have some different weather hazards will sort of impact some airports more than others. So for instance, at Pangborn, where mountain waves can be an issue, and so this is just kind of a graphic that's popped up here where these colors are the upper level jets, where if we have this northwest to southeast orient jets, where the max is kind of just north of that area, especially during the winter season, where we can have these inversion layers where we get breaking mountain waves with these higher winds aloft. That can be an issue, and we have had cases, especially around the month of January, where we've had very strong winds coming down the east slopes of the Cascades and breaking waves around the Wenatchee area, and 50 to 70 mile per hour winds are not uncommon with those. And we've had some damage, and it can be fairly localized as well. We'll get reports of damaging winds at one location, and not too far away, they don't get hit quite as hard. But obviously that can be something that will impact the Wenatchee Airport there. Looking over to the Columbia Basin, this is an area where we can get dust storms. And so I have a picture there of an actual dust storm. I can't remember what year this was. I think it was maybe 2014. But blowing dust is a concern. This particular image would be what we characterize as a haboob, which is much more common across the desert Southwest. But yes, we can get haboobs here across the basin where the thunderstorms will initiate over northeast Oregon and generally track northward up towards southeast Washington. And the strong winds that get generated from these thunderstorms will pick up dust during our driest part of the season in late July through August into early September is when these can occur. We do also get blowing dust events around the Moses Lake area. I don't know if you can see this on this Google Earth image, but there are a lot of croplands around, and so we do have planting seasons in the springtime and fall seasons where the worked ground can result in blowing dust if we have some winds blowing, and not even having to be necessarily wind advisory. It could be just below wind advisory, but we can have some, and we've had some blowing dust cases this year because there is an ongoing drought there across that part of our CWA. And then the Palouse, this is just an image here. It's a little busy, but there's a phenomenon, what we call the Palouse creeper, where if we have some drier northerly winds come down that kind of scour out much of the basin, if they're not strong enough to really scour out the moisture across the foothills of the Blue Mountains, then as those drier winds and that gradient weakens, the natural flow of the air here is a kind of a clockwise or a counterclockwise rotation around a surface low, and that can draw up the moisture into around Pullman, but also up into the Spokane area. We generate a lot of cold air here in the wintertime just because, like I said, we're surrounded by topography, and that colder air wants to sink down. And so that colder air and that increase in moisture can actually create an advection fog scenario where we get fog going up across the Palouse into Spokane area and then expanding out across the basin. And it's not uncommon for this to even go all the way across into the east slopes of the Cascade. So these are just a few examples. I wanted to kind of touch on how there are particular weather hazards that can more likely affect some airports than others. And so when I was thinking about this, I thought it would be great to be able to message this to the airports across the region, and also with the flying events that happen, to be talking to the pilots about these particular hazards. Also with all the other products that the Weather Service has to offer as well. So when I started thinking about our outreach program, wanting to when we go out to make sure to communicate these kind of risks depending on the area that I'm in. So that was kind of my thought process, and it's something that I incorporate into the outreach program as we're starting to change it in the Spokane area. So just kind of wrap up there, the hazards. Some of our most common hazards that we see, I guess what we would call our bread and butter for the winter season, is we do see a lot of fog and low stratus. It's not uncommon for long stretches of IFR or even LIFR conditions. And then for the summer season, fire weather is kind of a big thing here in Spokane. We do see a lot of fires that occur during the summer, and so it's not uncommon to see smoke impacts from those as well. We do see convection. Obviously today we're expecting a lot of thunderstorms, but usually thunderstorms we don't get a lot of convective activity, but we can get them as well during the summer season. So just an example here, I wanted to show how fog and stratus can kind of develop across our area. And so this is an example I took from 2017. This is on December 6th. A lot of the white is actually snow that you see, but there is some low clouds in here getting up into British Columbia, but also coming down into our northern valleys. There's also a little bit of low clouds in Pendleton's area, around the Tri-Cities area, and Pasco, Kennewick, There's also another city that makes up Tri-Cities. But as I go through this, you'll see how now the low clouds have expanded more across the basin here to our south and expanding across our north. The only clear skies we see is really east of Moses Lake to Spokane and Lewiston, and then filling in even more. And now the entire basin is completely covered with low clouds. And this is a strong ridge of high pressure that was building in. So like I said, it's not uncommon at all to have stretches of 3-4 days or maybe even a week or more where we just are completely socked in with low clouds with IFR conditions. And then for the summer, this is an example of where this was kind of an active fire season for us, especially in September. This is 2012, where there were some wildfires around Wenatchee, and that produced very low visibilities there at the Wenatchee Airport because of the smoke. And you can see there's also some wildfires there just south of Omak, which is an airport there in our Okanagan Valley. So smoke can be a concern as well for flying in and out of these airports across our area. Okay, so now that I've talked a lot about our meteorology, which hopefully the pilots here have found useful, I wanted to just kind of touch on our outreach and how the program is changing. And like I said, there's a lot of work. This is kind of an evolving thing here in Spokane. And unfortunately, with the COVID, I have not been able to go out to these pilot groups and airports this year or this summer. But hopefully next year we'll be in a much better spot where I can do that. But communicating our products and hazards, so getting out, providing talks, and also setting up booths for these flying events is very important. So being proactive, like I said, we had kind of more of a passive approach. Now we have this more active approach, which I think is important to actually getting out there, contacting pilot groups. I actually did a Google search and just, what is out there and who could I contact, who would be interested in having a forecaster going out there and talking about weather, contacting the airport managers, and then just see where that leads. So these were some of the associations. So the Washington Pilot Association is a big one for getting out to talking to pilots, and that has been great. I've talked to a lot of the presidents for the associations for the different chapters, and I've gone out to a lot of the different chapters there to provide talks. The EAA also, I went up to Sandpoint and talked to them. Idaho Aviation Association, and I've been in communication with them. So these are some of the associations that I've talked to. And then for the airports, I've gone out to Spokane International, the Wenatchee Airport, Moses Lake, and Lewiston. Also put the FAA there as well, and talked to them about our products and different weather hazards and how to keep up to date with the weather. So something that I thought was important was to have prepared presentation material. So have PowerPoint slides ready to go so that, because I found that there's a lot of interest out there, and I love talking to pilots because obviously they're passionate about weather. It's a safety issue for you guys, and so I really enjoy talking to pilots. But I want to make sure that, and because of that, it's hard to get to everybody and to do it every year. And but if I could get more forecasters on board in the office to go out and help me with this, that would be great. So having some material prepared so that they don't have to do that themselves is very beneficial. And the same thing with the aviation booths, just having some material prepared as well so that I don't have to be the one that go. It could be another forecaster to go, and they have sort of a blueprint for it. And this is my tour for 2019. I'll just put that up here. So all these dashed lines are the different, I just put on the locations for the Washington Pilot Association, but I also put the airports here that I visited, but all across our area. And the Metro Valley is kind of a new association that's being spun up there. But it was quite an active year last year. It took up a lot of my time, but I thought it was very beneficial. So this is the aviation booth that I had at the Wenatchee fly-in events. And so I had this kind of split up into 3 parts. There's 3 stations. The first one is what I call the eye candy, where it's just this big board where there's a lot of pictures up there to get people's interest and to draw them in. And so we had the resources that the Weather Service provides, hazardous weather information, and then just some pictures as well. So I also included a spot there talking about mountain waves, and I did have a pilot come over and say, you know, I did, you know, I have experienced some turbulence here in the Cascades, and he was familiar with that kind of activity that occurs. So I thought that was great to have him kind of come up and read about mountain wave activity here in the east slopes of the Cascades. The second station is kind of just some tangible material and literature where pilots or anybody who is looking for resources can actually grab and take home with them, and had some activities there for families. So it's a very popular family event that comes for these fly-ins as well. And then the last one, having a laptop set up where it can go over web-based resources, AWCs, that's the Aviation Weather Center, the CWSU, WFO pages, the Weather Forecast Office web pages. And then we talked about DAS yesterday, which is the Digital Aviation Services. That's going to be a big thing that's coming over the next coming years, looking at observations and models and soundings, and just kind of being there to talk about those resources. So some of these images that I included, just talking about how we can get fog there along the river near Wenatchee and how that can be a concern at times. And it can just, radiation fog will just form, and it's not something you see on satellite moving towards the area. It's just something that forms, and it can form very quickly. It's just kind of stepping through some of the graphics that I included for this fly-in, talking about, like I said, mountain waves. And then this was one talking about how we could get freezing precipitation, and that cold air damming in the east slopes of the Cascades is something that does occur quite a bit. It's a lot harder for that cold air to scrub out, and obviously any kind of freezing precipitation for airplanes is a concern. And the last thing I have is we did come up with a brochure, a pamphlet that kind of focuses on the Spokane area. So we talk about our tasks, the automated weather stations, the local support, a glossary for some important terms, EWC's material. I had to give a big thank you to Amanda Young, who's actually moved on to the ELCO forecast office, but she helped me develop this brochure, which I think is great, that we have sort of another piece of literature for pilots and anybody interested or has aviation interest to take home with them. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation there, and happy to take any questions. I have my contact information there, my email, and the phone number that you can contact me if you have questions as well.
Thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see anything new in chat, but I will wait a minute to see if any questions do come up. All right, I'm not seeing anything. Looks like you did a good job covering all the topics there.
All right,
so
thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. And we will be transitioning now to our lunch break. And actually, by some miracle, we are dead on the money on time right now. We're planning on starting our lunch break right now. So consider that a small miracle, especially given this is a virtual workshop. We will be coming back at 19 Zulu. That is 12 p.m. Pacific or 1 p.m. Mountain. And we'll let you figure out the rest of those time zones. I will once again send the link for anyone who is looking for wings credit today. Any pilots attending today can fill out the link that's now in chat, and that form is open to fill out. And we will be passing that along to our local FAA safety team representative. All right, everybody, thank you. Enjoy your lunch, and we will see you back here at 19 Zulu, noon Pacific, 1 p.m. Mountain.